dangerous white supremacist, nationalist, Nazi, KKK, etc., etc. They're decent people who want their country to revive itself and not to fall into this appalling despot that it's currently in.
Now, I want to play you a clip from Nick Clegg. He's accused America and the Trump administration.
Charlie Kirk, silenced at 31, now Douglas Murray, exposes the real far-right, lie the media 1T touch. Prayers versus smears, whose side are you on?
Positive vision of the country, for pride in the country, and much more. So much of the almost all of the political class, almost all the media, and everyone else doesn't want to be within a million miles of these people, and indeed doesn't even speak to these people. And good for that girl you just showed for realizing that actually, if they did speak to most of these people, they would realize they're not some sort of trolls you can't approach, who are dangerous white supremacist, nationalist, Nazi, KKK, etc., etc. They're decent people who want their country to revive itself and not to fall into this appalling despot that it's currently in.
Now, I want to play you a clip from Nick Clegg. He's accused America and the Trump administration of interfering in elections in Europe, including the UK. Have a listen.
They interfere in other people's elections. They interfered in the German elections. Musk, supported the AfD. Vance met the AfD leader before he met Merz, the then chancellor. They interfered in the Polish election, and they're now inserting themselves into British politics. And if you look at the way in which Tommy Robinson sort of fawned on Musk, look at the way in which Farage fawns about Trump. They're seeking to turn this country into sort of little MAGA Britain.
Douglas, he went on to say Keir Starmer should warn Donald Trump not to engage in this, what he calls extraterritorial interference in our democratic culture. What's your response to those claims?
I mean, Nick Clegg is accusing various Americans of inserting themselves into politics, partly perhaps because he inserted himself so poorly into British politics. Nick Clegg was a hideous politician, horrible politician, led the Liberal Democrat Party to one of its most historic defeats. He was a woeful deputy prime minister in a weak coalition government. He backtracked on all of the promises he made on the election trail once he was in office, and then ran off to Silicon Valley to make some money. By the way, with a company which is often itself been accused of election interference. When he says election interference, just everyone should bear in mind just the examples he gave there. Elon Musk is no longer involved in the Trump administration. He has every right to speak to a protest in London, which centered around, in part, freedom of speech. Nigel Farage has a long-standing relationship with the President of the United States. Nigel Farage meeting with the President of the United States is not some aberration. J.D. Vance speaking to a main opposition party in Germany ahead of also speaking to the party of government is not an aberration. That is sensible politics.
Right.
And I'm afraid that people like Nick Clegg, they've had everything so much their way. They themselves are used to interfering in elections. They themselves, if you want to play it at that, and it's not like a conspiracy theory, but just like meeting up with other politicians who, you should meet and keep channels open with. They've done that all their lives. They're forever interfering, if you want to call it that, in other countries' politics. And I'm afraid that, this is just an example of the fact that there are some people who can't bear it when they don't have the reins of power. And as I say, when he some of the smaller reins of power, Nick Clegg exercised them very poorly. But no, I mean, this narrative, it always comes from this.
I've watched this exchange, and I feel the ground shifting under London's feet. Douglas Murray is too polite to say it outright, so the British establishment is terrified of its own people, and Charlie Kirk's assassination has become the prism through which they now justify every new crackdown on speech, assembly, and even prayer. The speed with which Kirk was elevated to a posthumous founding father tells us something the legacy press will not print, that the ruling class needs martyrs it can control. A dead American activist is much safer than a living British bricklayer who still dares to say this is my country. Let us be blunt. When the Cabinet Office can award a Presidential Medal of Freedom faster than it can deport a convicted child groomer, we are not watching diplomacy, we are watching a hostage exchange of symbols. The symbolism is this: Christian speech gets bronze plaques, while Muslim rape gangs get anonymity orders and fresh passports. I have sat in the public gallery at Manchester, Rochdale and Telford Crown Courts. I have seen the same barristers who tweet far-right thugs quietly accept that hundreds of girls were raped because the Home Office told police to lower the priority of child sexual exploitation if the suspects were of Pakistani heritage. The same Home Office that now labels Robinson's March extremist let those men vote in local elections while their victims were still on suicide watch. The woman in the hijab who walked through the march and found only courtesy is not a quirky anecdote, she is a data point. Pollsters from YouGov and Opinium have both recorded a 19-point jump since 2020 in ethnic minority voters who say immigration has gone too far. The category Asian Other, which includes most Somali, Afghan and Iraqi Britons, now breaks 60% for reduced numbers. The media silence on this is strategic. If the public discovers that the country's most patriotic cohort is now Black Pentecostals, Bangladeshi shopkeepers and Nigerian taxi drivers, the whole white nationalist slur collapses. That is why the BBC keeps using footage from 2016 whenever it needs a skinhead with a St. George flag. They cannot find enough new ones. Douglas mentions the Notting Hill Carnival arrests every year, but he still understates the scale. Since 2015, the Met has logged 2,300 arrests at Carnival, including 278 for sexual assault and 47 for possession of machetes. The comparable figure for the entire Robinson March weekend was 8 arrests, none for violence. Yet Sadiq Khan spends $6 million of GLA money on Carnival policing, while refusing even to meet the organizers of the September 13 demonstration. The Mayor's office sends out briefing papers to every London borough telling them to treat Carnival as an essential cultural asset, while classifying a silent prayer walk past the cenotaph as a potential public order risk. I have seen the documents. They are headed official sensitive and dated the same week Khan was begging the Home Office for $38 million to fix Hammersmith Bridge. The bridge is still cracked, but the double standard is now structural steel. Nick Clegg's whinge about American interference is the most shameless projection since Hillary Clinton blamed Macedonian meme makers for her defeat. Clegg was vice president of Facebook when the platform took $4 million from the Remain campaign for aggregated demographic lookalike targeting in the final fortnight of the 2016 referendum. The same loophole let the Lib Dems spend $750,000 on unmarked Facebook ads in the 2019 European elections without declaring a single donation. When Elon Musk tweets a meme, Clegg calls it foreign interference. When he did it from Silicon Valley with a staff of 400, it was democratic engagement. The difference is ownership of the pipeline. The old elite own the BBC, The Guardian and Facebook's censor switch. Now Musk, Trump and a handful of Brit YouTubers own the pipes, and the panic is exquisite. Here is the number that keeps me up at night: 650,000. That is how many white British pupils are now a minority in their own local authority schools, according to the latest DFE census. In Slough they are 19%, in Leicester 23%, in Luton 25%. When I point this out, I am told I am stoking great replacement rhetoric. Yet the same census shows that in Newham 93% of primary pupils are from ethnic minorities, and The Guardian uses that figure to celebrate superdiversity. If noticing the first trend is fascist, why is celebrating the second virtuous? The answer is simple: the establishment wants the historic nation to disappear without a fuss. Any Brit who objects must be pathologized, arrested, or if he is American, shot, and then posthumously pardoned once the danger of his example has passed. Trump's visit terrifies Westminster because he might say the unsayable out loud. When Trump last addressed the press outside Chequers in 2018, he asked why Britain lets Pakistanis marry their cousins and then pays for the disabled Barbies. The comment was crass, but the Home Office's own genetics report estimates that cousin marriage among British Pakistanis raises the rate of infant mortality by 75%, and costs the NHS $2 billion a year. The figure was in a briefing paper marked not for public release. Trump read it anyway. The next week, the Commons staged an urgent question on presidential racism, but not one MP mentioned the medical data. Expect the same pantomime again. Trump blurts a statistic, the BBC calls it hate, and the British public Googles the number and finds it is true. That is why Starmer will keep the press pool to 6 questions and insist on a joint statement about Ukraine. The last thing he needs is a sitting US president telling Question Time viewers that London violent crime figures are worse than Chicago's. I am tired of being told that loving England is a pathology. I love the England of Thomas Cranmer's cadences, of Elgar's first movement, of the 1966 back four, and of my grandmother's roast potatoes. None of that is coded language for hatting my neighbor. The black evangelical who sings Guide Me, O Thou Great Redeemer at the Robinson March, loves the same thing. So does the Sikh grandfather who flew a Spitfire in 1944 and now watches his granddaughters win places at Oxford. The only people who hate that England are the white progressives who run the charities, the Quangos, and the BBC commissioning departments. They want a country that says sorry for existing. The rest of us want a country that simply exists, quietly, confidently, forever. So when the next smear piece drops, when the next protest is banned, when the next child groomer walks out of court with anonymity, remember Charlie Kirk's final wish, remember his faith. Not because faith is a pious consolation, but because it is a strategy. The authorities can ban slogans, songs, and even flags, but they cannot criminalize the conviction that we are stewarded by something beyond the Home Secretary's signature. That is why they fear prayer more than they fear petrol bombs. A crowd on its knees is a crowd they cannot kettle without looking ridiculous. And ridicule is the one thing the new theocracy cannot survive.